Welcome, everyone. My name is Robin Lucas. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Manager at AAUW. So thank you for joining us to learn about the importance of being a well-informed voter and what AAUW is doing about it. As you know, since the first meeting in 1881, AAUW has been a catalyst for change. Together, through our coordinated and strategic advocacy, we've enacted invaluable legislation at the federal, state, and local levels. That work is more important now than ever, and we have more unique opportunity and responsibility to advocate for women and girls in this tumultuous moment. And one of the most important ways that we can advocate is through our votes. In this important election year, AAUW and the AAUW Action Fund encourage individuals to get involved in the political process by educating themselves and others about the issues at stake and where the candidates stand on them. We're here to help you with that. AAUW and the AAUW Action Fund provide a number of resources, and even more voter engagement happens on the state and local levels through our branch leaders. And this afternoon, we're going to talk to you about how you can inform yourselves, the importance of doing so, and resources to assist with those efforts. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers. Today you'll hear from two AAUW leaders. Kimberly Adams is a member of the AAUW Board of Directors, a professor of political science, and an activist. And Young-hee Overly is the State Public Policy Chair of AAUW of Hawaii, as well as a member of the AAUW Public Policy Committee. Together, they're going to walk you through the critical need for an informed electorate and ways our AAUW branches and members are engaging in this important work. Then my colleague Kate Nielsen will join us to shift into some open discussion, and we'll take as many of your questions as possible. Welcome to you both, and thank you for being here. So first, let's start with the key issues AAUW is asking voters to focus on this election and resources that we provide on them. So our first key resource of the day, our voter issue guide is here. It focuses on 7 key issues for 2022. And I just want to run through a few of them quickly. First one is voting access. Our next speaker will touch on this in more detail tonight, but I really want to drive home that if voter access is expanded to every accessible, safe, and secure method possible, then we will achieve a democratic election. The 2, 3, and 4 cover a lot of ground for workplace equity overall. Our elected officials must support pay equity, access to paid leave and affordable childcare, and protections against workplace harassment and discrimination. The 5th one is healthcare and reproductive rights. With the recent Supreme Court decision, effectively ending federal protection for abortion care, mounting attacks on contraception and comprehensive sex education, and the maternal health crisis reaching new heights, many of us know this is a critical issue facing the nation this election season. The 6th is college affordability, so an exciting one to cover. The debt cancellation announcement from the White House recently was a historic step forward. One we must build momentum around, though. This is one step forward. And we must keep pushing the conversation forward to ensure that the solutions truly address the root problems of the student debt crisis. And finally, campus sexual harassment and violence. We all know that this is a problem that will not just go away. Right now, make sure that you're carrying the conversation and that survivors are getting the resources and support they need, and by making sure that this is a key issue in the election. So each of these issues are covered in depth inside the guide to give you the background to engage with candidates. For example, so here we see keywords for the paid leave and care infrastructure section and an example question for the candidates that's included in the guide. Each section of the guide includes a summary of the issue, key terms, and at least 2 questions that you can pose to candidates when engaging with them to determine where they stand on our issues. Sometimes it can be very difficult for voters to approach a candidate or their staff to form exactly how they wish to ask a question. By providing some sample questions, we're supporting voters in asking the pointed questions that they need to ask and hopefully get the answers that they need to help them decide who to support. Our AAUW leaders and members report back that these aspects of the voter issue guide specifically are incredibly helpful when attending candidate forums or when researching a candidate's position. Speaking of researching a candidate's position on issues, we come to our second key resource for voter education, The AUW Action Fund provides templates for voters to utilize called head-to-head voter guides, as exampled in this slide. These resources help voters assess candidates across key issues. The templates are structured for either federal or state races and are available on the AUW Action Fund website in Word format for you to download and use with any and all of your specific races. They cover issues across economic security, education, and then civil rights is a little further down, but did not fit on the slide, and touch on the 2022 voter issue guide topics. This example, the template for federal races, has space for you to put which exact race, the candidates and their parties, and sections with specific information to seek based on our 2022 voter issue guide. And finally, the third resource for voter education purposes, the AUW Action Fund Congressional Voting Record. This provides information about elected federal legislators through the votes they cast on issues that are critical to the Action Fund's mission. The Congressional Voting Record, or CVR, provides information about senators and representatives' co-sponsorship and votes. Each legislator is scored based on their record on AUW priorities, which were decided on the basis of the AUW public policy priorities, which are adopted by AUW members. These priorities include what I've gone over with the voter issue guide, but include equal pay, education, campus sexual assault, campaign finance, human trafficking, reproductive rights. There's an expansive number of issues that they're scored on. While our congressional voting record resource is compiled at the end of each term and the current Congress record won't be available until after this election, those incumbents of more than one term or candidates seeking to return to office may be found in this resource. Seeing how elected officials actually act once in their role is incredibly crucial when considering them in an election. So those are the three key resources that we have on our website right now. And then now I'd like us to take a step back and explore exactly why voter education resources like AUWs are so critical. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Kimberly Adams to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robin. It's a pleasure. We spend a lot of time during this time of the year trying to make sure people are informed about the decisions that they will be making. And that happens to be on November 8th this year for midterm elections. The importance of the informed voter. Informed voters are needed, one, to preserve our democracy. When we think about voting, it is the heart of our democracy, and exercising your right to vote is one of the single most important decisions that you will make. Informed voters also, the information helps us to combat the influence of dis and misinformation. When we think about these two components, we know that they are part of our system with social media, and so informed voters usually are able to distinguish between dis and misinformation. Another reason that we want to have informed voters is to fight against anti-voter laws that we're seeing throughout the country being passed in a lot of state legislatures at this time since the 2020 elections. Informed voters are also, they better understand policies and issues and how these issues affect them personally. When we think about barriers to obtaining accurate information, of course, we know that the airwaves and the social media sites are filled with types of information about voting. And so when we think about barriers to obtaining accurate information, there comes this disinformation and misinformation. And when we think about disinformation, it's a false information deliberately spread to deceive people. And sometimes it confuses with misinformation, which is a false information, but it's not deliberate. So one is intentional and one is accidental. Also, one of the barriers to obtaining accurate information is that when we see this disinformation being broadcast in the social media sites and what have you, we see that it is pervasive in minority voter spaces. Is it intentional? Many times, I guess it is, but we know that statistics have shown that these types of disinformation, is pervasive in minority voter spaces. And it leads to hyperpartisanship. People have these malign actions are used to sow discord and distrust, and people on both sides of the aisle begin to hold tight to their partisan beliefs. And so that types of confusion leads to conflict and tension. Also, another aspect of barriers to obtaining accurate information is foreign interference. And that happens largely through social media as well. And the intent there is to sow distrust in American institutions. And many of you who watch the news and are on social media, you know that there's been a recent influx of information to sow our distrust in and question our institutions that have been with us for generations. Also, this foreign interference intent is to eliminate or illuminate fear in our voters. So people begin to question the institution or the integrity of elections, and then say, well, I don't know if my vote is going to count. And therefore that allows us to decrease voter turnout. A question, and of course, questions election outcomes. And so that distrust, when you sow the distrust and disinformation into the minds of voters, then it has the possibility and the ability to turn voters off and to make them question the institutions and therefore not vote. When we think about further barriers that we're seeing and incurring right now is anti-voter laws. I'm on sabbatical right now, and I'm researching a lot of bills that's been passed since the 2020 elections. And so I know that a lot of states are passing laws and making it harder for people to vote. So when we think about registration, ballot access, certification, all of these types of things regard to voting and obtaining accurate information is under attack. Bills are being introduced to restrict voting, to criminalize and punish voters. I watched the news yesterday and I saw that in Florida, there were like 5 Black people being arrested, totally oblivious to what they've done. And it had to do with some type of punishment for voting in an election. And so also a barrier is to obtaining accurate information. What we're seeing is this independent state legislative theory. And the Supreme Court would be hearing a case that deals with this in Moore versus Harper. And so this would allow the states to pass restrictive laws and not have the checks and balances that we're so used to seeing with regard to elections at the federal level and Congress, who have weighed in many instances when it comes to voting rights. Another thing that has led to that has served as a barrier, and these elections are held in each state. So the fact that we have so many elections and so many election laws, and they're changing, has also led to a lot of confusion with voters. It's unclear about laws on voting, about mail-in voting, about early voting, about absentee voting, about provisional ballots. That's intimidating to people. And I work with students all the time, and they question, well, what's the difference? And they don't want to appear to be to be ignorant of the issues or the process. So they are intimidated in many instances when it comes to these barriers. It undermines voter confidence in the election when you change these laws, and it leads to a decreased turnout. So when we think about some steps to being a well-informed voter, we've heard this over and over throughout the news recently. One way that we can overcome these barriers and make sure that we are informed about the issues and show up is to plan your vote. And vote in person, whether you want to vote by mail, where you want to vote absentee, or you want to access early voting. Go to the websites in your states, the Secretary of State's offices, to find out what the deadlines and dates are and plan your vote. Follow the 2020 census, which districts you're in, who is on the ballot. That information is readily available. You will be surprised and probably overwhelmed with the amount of information you're going to receive. The next thing you want to do is confirm the voting deadlines in your locality. That's so important in order to combat the intimidation factors. Knowing what to do helps. And then know the issues that matter most to you and that are on the ballot. Know where you stand, know where your candidate stands. And that's when you know you have cast an informed ballot.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you sharing the importance of being a well-informed voter. Next, we would like to switch to Young Hee, who is going to share how she takes AUW resources and these concerns into consideration and provides direct opportunities for accurate information for the voters in her area.
Thank you. So my name is Young Hee, and as Robin mentioned, I'm the State Public Policy Chair for AAUW of Hawaii. In Hawaii, we have 6 branches, as you can see on the map. We have 2 in Big Island, 2 in Oahu, and then 1 in Kauai, and 1 in Maui. So we have done 3 different type of projects over the last 6 years that I have been involved with public policy. One is voter registration, and that's done by the branches, typically organized by either the branch president or public policy team at the branch level. We have partners for voter registration, both locally and nationally. And I do want to comment on some of the points that Dr. Adams made in relation to Center for Common Ground Reclaim Our Vote. This is a case where many Black and Latino voters are purged, sometimes because they haven't voted every election, sometimes because there was a misspelling in something. And it gets done systematically in certain states. So Center for Common Ground works to contact those voters who have been purged from the voter file to make sure that they re-register. So AAUW Hawaii branches have partnered with them to work on that project. Now, Voter Guide, which Robin has shown an example for 2022, is another project we have done, and Candidate Forums is another project we have done, and both Voter Guide and Candidate Forums are being led at the state level by the public policy team. So what I want to talk to you more about today is what we've done with Candidate Forum. What I'm going to do is share with you what we did in 2020 and what we did differently in 2022. So in 2020, it was the first time we did candidate forums. And what we did was we chose 6 districts where we had AAUW members, and more importantly, where we had candidates who are friends or allies of AAUW issues. In 2020, we knew that we would be working on Title IX bills. So that was one of the questions we asked about all the candidates. We also included more general topics such as voting rights, because Hawaii voted by mail, or we went all vote by mail in 2020, and we wanted to put additional focus on voting rights and voting access. So we did a topic that is of interest to AAUW public policy team, and also a general topic. And you probably will notice that it's a lot of fun for us to do candidate forum with, especially with candidates and districts in Big Island, because we have many different parties who participate in our candidate forum, including Libertarian, Aina Party, and sometimes even Green Party. So we get a lot of different views, and these forums are lots of fun for us. So in 2022, we decided to, again, select the districts where we had members and we had candidates who are allies to AAUW issues. But in 2022, what we decided to do differently was to also partner with League of Women Voters. So the issues we picked what are issues that interested the combined interest of the two different organizations. So next year, in 2023, we plan to support reproductive rights bills in Hawaii. So that was one of the questions we focused on. But we also had more general topic that would be such as climate change that we wanted to ask the candidates about. In addition to picking state house and Senate districts where we had a candidate forum, this year when YWCA contacted us to see if we want to partner with them on candidate forums for lieutenant governor as well as governor elections, we jumped on the chance because this is a big year because we have this is a big year for both of these elections because we will have a new governor this year. So although it's a midterm election for Hawaii, it's a very important year. So we jumped on the chance of being able to partner with these organizations to sponsor candidate forums. And we also had a chance to include one of our issues as part of the questions we ask. So I mentioned earlier that we did candidate forum in 2020 and 2022, and that there were some differences between the two. What we did in 2020, because of pandemic, frankly, we decided to use Zoom to do the candidate forum. And for the state level House districts and Senate district candidate forum, even in 2022, although we could have done it in person, we decided to go ahead and do those using Zoom. And the reason we decided to do that is because when you're using Zoom, it really simplifies things for both the participants as well as us. And in addition to that, if you use the integration Zoom has with Facebook Live, you could really get to a wider set of people. So for example, typically our candidate forum gets 50 to 70 participants over Zoom, but we typically get over 100 people watching it over Facebook Live. And then of course it gets stored on Facebook and we see people viewing it shortly after the candidate forum as well. So technology in this case, although we were introduced to it because of COVID pandemic, we see ourselves continuing to use the technology to do our candidate forums. And speaking of technology, we also use social media to promote because that allows us to tag the candidates, which broadens the audience we can reach out to. And we make sure that it's easy to share both the invitation as well as the videos that we record using the Zoom. So we are glad that we are more or less forced to use technology in 2020 because we learned a lot of good things about it and we expect ourselves to continue to do so. Now changing the topic a little bit to the format and content of the forums, we have learned that when we are phrasing the questions for the candidate, we really need to word it so that we get some specifics out of the answers. So you could do that in the questions you ask. For example, do not ask, do you support equal pay? Because all of them will say, yes, they do. You do have to ask, how do you support equal pay, or get specific on what you may want them to support, especially if you have a bill that you are introducing. You can also ask the candidates to be very specific with their answers by giving examples or policy details. So that's something we learned that was very valuable learning that I want to share with you. And you probably noticed that some of our districts got larger participation than not from the candidate's perspective. It's not because we only invited few in some of the districts. We invite everyone, but some of the candidates choose not to participate. So make sure, I'm sure it will happen to you as well. So make sure that your audience know that you invited all candidates. So without you saying it, it implies that the other candidates who chose not to participate for whatever reason. And again, we did it ourselves in 2020, and then in 2022, we decided to partner with other women's organizations, and that also was a lot of fun partnering. And we are thinking that we need to broaden the partnership to include labor, especially in 2024, when we plan to work on equal pay again. And also when you're working on issues such as campus safety or Title IX or reproductive rights, I think it's also a good idea to partner with the universities as well. So back over to you, Robin.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Young-hee. I appreciate it. At this point, I'm going to welcome everyone back to their cameras and remind attendees, if you have any questions for us, you can drop it in the Q&A function on Zoom, and we are happy to take some questions. And we will start off with the first few we've got.
Great. This is Kate Nielsen. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm the Senior Director of Public Policy, Legal Advocacy, and Research at AAUW. Thank you so much, Dr. Adams and Young-hee, for your comments, and Robin for all of your work. I'm happy to take any questions now. But as folks think about what they'd like to ask and participate in the discussion, I just want to start out by asking both of our panelists, and Robin, maybe you as well, depending on their answers, what your favorite resources are. We've reviewed some AAUW resources, and the voter guides are a really wonderful way to get information. But what other resources are your go-to resources for finding out information about where candidates stand on the issues? Let's start with Young-hee.
Yeah, I like the voter guide because it's a simple way of figuring out what the question should be for our candidates, right? Because although we do elaborate to fit into what we are doing in Hawaii, it gives me framework and language we can use.
Thanks, Young-hee. Dr. Adams?
Well, I have a lot of resources. One is I look at the Cook report, I look at Ballotpedia so that we can go, and I know that Robin does too, Ballotpedia, because it gives you the breakdown of the district and the opponents and all that information, how much money they've raised. And so that information is always important. I also look at the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, and it's called Circle, and it's at Tufts University in Massachusetts. And I guess my final one would be the Brennan Center, because they do a lot of analysis of these elections, and they have a lot of data. And as a political scientist, it's always wonderful to see the data that they have collected, especially right now when they're doing a lot of analysis on anti-voter laws, and they have about 400 of them. And so their findings have been on point.
Thank you for sharing that. Everyone on this webinar today are big fans of the Brennan Center for Justice. We love a data-informed perspective. In addition to that, thanks for calling out Ballotpedia. Once you know where you're voting, Ballotpedia is, it is a Wikipedia kind of function, but it can link you and showcase who's on the ballot in your area. And then the next step from there that I take is going to the candidate's campaign site directly. I think that there are so many issues that we know AAUW covers. It's impossible for us to cover everything in a single webinar ourselves, but it showcases where a candidate's priorities are, if something is on their website or lacking on their website. And I think that's really important to determine, to see if equal pay or work safety from workplace harassment is high enough up on their list of concerns to make it onto the campaign site. So I use that as a very helpful barometer as well.
Kate, I just wanted to add, when I mentioned Circle, I wanted to talk about the fact that a lot of the youth voters, they target a lot of the young people and what's important to them. So I failed to mention that at first, but Circle is a wonderful source. It's the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, and they do a tremendous job.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your comments and thoughts. So one sort of follow-up question, some more information about our head-to-head voter guides. We have a participant wondering the best way to raise public awareness once we've completed head-to-head guides. And I know that once they're completed and vetted and sent out to the candidates to make sure that they're accurate, we're happy to post them on the AAUW Action Fund website. But Young-hee, maybe do you have any ideas? What do you all do to make sure that that folks know about this great resource?
It's a similar marketing tactic as we'll promote candidate forum. So we do ask candidates who answer to also share it, because obviously their social media pages are visited often, right? So we do leverage the candidates in addition to obviously communicating through AAUW Hawaii's own social media, as well as emails and newsletters. We haven't really tried this yet, but it may be also another thing we want to try, which is actually paper, because in Hawaii, yes, the papers are still very popular. It just you just gotta figure out how, when and how to promote it. But so far, what we've done was leveraging candidates in social media.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. From the AAUW national perspective, the way that it works is our state public policy chairs will sometimes spearhead it in the state level and can share it with me. And once we go through our finalizing process and we get it up on our website at the AAUW Action Fund website. And if there are members on today who have interest in filling out some of these for their local races, the capacity support is always deeply appreciated. So you can fill it out and cite your sources and share it with your state or branch leadership, who can then funnel it up to me. But we're very happy to continue to expand every election how many races are listed on our head-to-head voter guide site. And I know we're currently in the course of uploading a few states who have already shared many from their states.
Thank you all. Dr. Adams, I want to go back to something that you mentioned before. You talked a lot about the concerns and barriers that impact voters. I'm wondering what advice you'd give to our AAUW members who are looking to talk to their friends and families about needing to be informed voters.
Well, I mean, we have to talk about voting through a lens of voter empowerment. We have to talk about, you didn't do anything wrong because somebody put a barrier. The barrier was there to stop you from having the power that the ballot has, that the ballot carried. I mean, when we think about this, I go back to the 1960s. I'm from Mississippi, and we have had these barriers for a long time with regard to minority voters, with the polling, with the literacy tests, with the white primary, with these grandfather clause, these types of things, the poll tax. And so we overcame those, and we will overcome these. It's just a fear among voters right now that their status is being challenged and minority voters are somehow taken over. So you have to approach voting as it's a part of your empowerment. Make sure that you have the knowledge that you need to go. Make sure that you know the issues, because the disinformation is there to deter you from this is the one thing that we can do in a democratic society, is to have free and fair elections and make sure that your ballot counts. So know what you're talking about. Being informed is so important. That's the tool. Knowledge is the tool. because there's so many powers out there against us having free and fair elections. So the advice that I give you is to know, and to know that you're exercising your civic duty by being a part of this process. This is not a spectator sport. Politics is not a spectator sport. You have to be active. And so know that you're doing your civic duty when you cast that vote, and have the requisite knowledge that you need to cast an informed vote.
Can I add something?
Of course.
So I mentioned it briefly, but the Reclaim Our Vote campaign is a campaign that I really recommend a campaign for membership meetings or just public meetings because it's a nonpartisan organization, right? So you could write postcards, you could phone bank, and you are contacting voters without their knowledge who have been purged from voter file. So I personally have phone banked with them, and because it's a nonpartisan organization, AAUW you can do it as an AAUW event, right? So you're contacting voters, and again, typically Black and Latino voters in certain states where they have a law and policies to regularly purge people. And it's extremely satisfying because you contact them and they didn't know that they were purged. Yeah. So you know that you just helped somebody to register again so they can vote, right? Because they just went through, you just went through that, it's very likely that they're gonna vote that year, right? So I really recommend that as a project for all the branches.
Absolutely. There's a lot of work in that area. I do think that where AUW shines and offers a lot of assistance and work on the national and state level is with the voter issue guide and supplying those questions and providing the concrete information that a lot of folks sometimes struggle with at the polls and before the polls when making their decisions. Again, because there are so many issue areas that we're all concerned with. We are very complex individuals, person to person, and having at least the narrowed down list that AUW revisits every election it can at least help lighten the load. And speaking personally, not projecting, but the anxiety of trying to decide what to look at the election through the lens of. So I really appreciate everyone who contributes to it, particularly folks like Young Hee in the states who then disseminate that on the state and local level and utilize it because it's really powerful. I think we've got time for a few more questions here.
Alrighty. Thank you all for those answers and insights. Young Hee, I wanted to touch a little bit on some of your experiences. It's come up a few different times already that we're a nonpartisan organization. And as an aside, I do want to put in a plug for a webinar that we held last year about being nonpartisan, but that doesn't mean that we're not political. I think it's really important to keep those distinctions in mind, but also know that there's plenty of ways to engage in political work while being nonpartisan. So that the recording of that webinar is available on our website. So with that as a segue, Young Hee, I'm wondering if you can talk about, through that lens, what it's like to host a candidate forum and how it's influenced how you do host those forums. And the way that you host them, how you word your questions, and if you have any insights that you can share with our members who might be trying to figure out how to do that appropriately.
Sure, thank you for that question. I mentioned earlier that our candidate forums we do with candidates from Big Island is a lot of fun because we get candidates from a variety of parties, not just your Democrat and Republican, but we have Libertarian, INA parties, some nonpartisan independent candidates. And that allows us to have rather colorful and interesting dialogue on topics that we often are very narrowly focused on, right? Because we all know where AAUW stands. And so it's delightful to hear other aspect to it, and sometimes delightfully surprised. Now, on the great question, Kate, about the how do you phrase the questions, we try to phrase the questions in more open-ended way. So for example, if you want to talk about equal pay, it will be something like how would you support equal pay? What are the challenges? How do you think Hawaii is doing, and what are the challenges Hawaii is facing? Could you be specific with the policy you may propose or policy that you have supported before, right? Because we have some incumbents. And that allows candidates coming from different perspectives to be able to answer it. Because it's open-ended, and then by asking them to give specifics, you get to find out if they know really anything about the topic or not. And it doesn't take much to figure out they don't know anything about the topic, or that someone just did a homework right before the candidate forum, or someone is a real expert. And that becomes very clear during that discussion. So that will be the recommendation I have.
Thank you, Young-hee. That's great. Well, I really need to thank both of you for your insights. I think that this was some really good and useful information, a lot of great food for thought. Again, Robin, thank you for all of your effort in organizing this and pulling together all this information. As a way to sort of conclude and wrap up this really important discussion, I'd love to ask you about one action that you think our members should take after watching this webinar today. What do you think is the most important thing, or maybe not even the most important, but the sort of least top of mind that you want to pull folks' attention towards when you think about voting in the upcoming election? What would you like to ask of our members? Let's start with Dr. Adams.
Well, when people begin to challenge the integrity of our elections, or to state those things, I would ask that you challenge them, not in a negative way, but in a way of educational. When they say that the machines are rigged, or when they say that we're pushing a certain agenda, ask them how and why. Our country since 1787, we've been holding elections. And so we have to believe in the institutions that we have. So what I want us to do is to challenge the misinformation in a positive way and redirect it into believing in our institutions, because they work. We will, and we have hosted free and fair elections, and we will continue to. So we need to challenge these notions of misinformation and do it in an intelligent, knowledgeable way.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Young-hee?
I would ask all members to make sure that 5 friends or family members come out to vote this year, because this is midterm, which means turnout will be really low. And add to that with an issue. Pick one of AAUW issues in the voter guide that Robin shared earlier, and pick an issue and first learn where your own candidates stand, whether it's at the federal district level, congressional district level, or state level, or county level. Right? It'll be more interesting to do it at state level, actually. But and then tell your family and friends why you are supporting certain candidates, and tie that back to AAUW, because you are AAUW member and you are supporting AAUW issue and specific candidates. But mostly, turn your family and friends out to vote this year. We only got 3 weeks left,
20 days.
And voting has already started.
Yes, that's right. Well, thank you, Young-hee. Thank you, Dr. Adams. And Robin, I'll turn it over to you for the last word.
Absolutely. Thank you both for sharing those. Those are both just excellent final messages there. I will add one shameless plug here. For those who are interested in getting a little bit more involved in AUW related election season activities, please reach out to your state or branch leaders who will connect you with your state public policy chairs and other AUW leadership who do continue to do work like this on a consistent basis up until the election, because they would love to hear from you and have more support. And just a shout out to them for doing really incredible work in the States. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for bringing your expertise and incredible perspectives as speakers. And we appreciate everyone. And go take advantage of the voter education resources. Have a great day.
Thank you. We love AAUW.
Thanks.